show and frankly to yourself. Don't you dare tell me how I'm representing myself, Julia snapped. You don't get to judge me. I'm not judging you, Kelly shot back. I'm responding to you coming onto my show and attacking everything about it. You agreed to be here, Julia. Nobody forced you. If you hate this so much, if you think talk shows are beneath you, then why are you here at all? This explosive confrontation wasn't just a clash of egos. It was the total disintegration of a Hollywood facade in real time. For decades, Julia had been the gold standard of the approachable superstar. But in this singular, high-tension moment, the mask didn't just slip, it shattered. The audience sat in a paralyzing silence, caught between the polished world of daytime television and a raw, uncomfortable reality they weren't prepared to face. Julia's bitter laugh echoed through the studio, a sound that carried the weight of 30 years of resentment. She claimed she was only there because the system demanded it, fearing the headlines that would label her difficult or washed up if she refused to perform. She looked at Kelly not as a peer, but as a willing cog in a toxic machine designed to keep celebrities performing like trained animals. Kelly, visibly shaken but determined to maintain control of her stage, tried to offer a professional olive branch. She suggested a break, a private moment to recalibrate. But Julia saw this only as another tactic of narrative control. To Julia, Kelly's condescending concern was a weapon used to paint her as unstable while Kelly played the role of the saintly mediator. The air in the room was thick with a palpable, suffocating energy as the two women stood locked in a psychological stalemate. Kelly insisted she was trying to salvage Julia's dignity. But Julia was no longer interested in dignity. She was interested in fire. She argued that the very bridges Kelly was trying to save needed to be burned to the ground. She challenged the normalcy of the entire industry, questioning why anyone would find meaning in answering vapid questions under hot lights, while pretending to be best friends. As Kelly's frustration finally broke through, the conversation shifted from a professional disagreement to a fundamental battle over the value of connection versus the artifice of performance. Kelly defended her show as a place of escape and healing for her viewers, while Julia dismissed it as a gallery of recycled questions and manufactured moments. The tension had reached a point of no return. The battle lines were drawn with a sharpness that left no room for retreat. Kelly's eyes blazed as she finally confronted the superstar, refusing to remain a passive recipient of Julia's vitriol. She laid out a hard truth. Julia had walked onto that stage with a pre-existing agenda, looking for a fight to vent frustrations. That likely had nothing to do with the show itself. Kelly's voice, though shaking with the weight of the moment, remained steady in its conviction. She spoke of the hard work she had put in and the genuine respect she had held for Julia, a respect that was evaporating with every passing second of the interview. The audience watched, breathless, as Julia stepped closer to the desk, her presence looming. She accused Kelly of hypocrisy, claiming the show only wanted the Julia Roberts bump for its ratings and was now upset that the guest wasn't following the script. It was a cynical view of the industry that stripped away any pretense of mutual benefit. Kelly, however, fought back with her own vulnerability. She spoke of the preparation she had done, the films she had rewatched, and the thoughtful questions she had crafted about Julia's foundation and her life's work. She wasn't looking for a bump. She was looking for a person. But the woman standing before her was a stranger, an unrecognizable version of the America's sweetheart the world thought it knew. Julia's response was chillingly quiet, possessing an intensity that surpassed her earlier shouting. She admitted that the world had never truly known her, that she had been playing a character for 3 decades. Kelly seized on this, challenging her to finally stop hiding behind the mask of anger and show the world who she actually was. She pointed out that lashing out wasn't a sign of strength, but a cry of pain. This moment of psychological warfare saw Kelly attempting to peel back the layers of Julia's defenses, suggesting that despite her protests, Julia had come to the show because a part of her still desperately wanted to be seen and heard. For a fleeting second, the armor cracked. A flash of genuine vulnerability crossed Julia's face, suggesting that Kelly had hit a nerve. But the moment was brief. The hardness returned, even more impenetrable than before, as Julia doubled down on her claim that the entire industry was toxic and that everyone within it was being damaged in ways they couldn't articulate. The standoff intensified as the conversation veered into the territory of personal philosophy and survival. Julia's expression was a haunting mosaic of anger and deep-seated pain as she dismissed Kelly's language of resilience as nothing more than a glorified form of denial. To Julia, there was no beauty in the struggle. There was only the slow, systematic erosion of the self by a business that took everything and gave back only hollow fame. She predicted a grim awakening for Kelly, warning her that the toxic positivity she projected was just a temporary bandage on a fundamentally broken existence. Kelly, however, stood her ground with a different kind of strength. She refused to let Julia's bitterness define her own experience. She acknowledged the cruelty and the exhaustion of the industry, but she chose to focus on the opportunities it provided, the ability to help others, to support her family, and to use her platform for a greater good. This fundamental disagreement over the nature of gratitude and perspective was the final straw. When Julia mockingly congratulated Kelly on being a cog in the machine, the last of Kelly's legendary patience shattered. The atmosphere in the studio shifted from a heated debate to a total breakdown of professional decorum. Kelly stopped trying to be the understanding host and started defending her humanity. She called out Julia's behavior for what it truly was, not enlightenment, but a cruel and arrogant display of hostility. Julia, stung by the accusation, invoked her own sacrifices and the hidden battles she had fought. But Kelly was no longer buying the tortured artist's defense. She demanded that Julia show basic human decency instead of being vicious for the sake of it. The audience's gasp was audible, a collective intake of breath that signaled the gravity of the situation. People began to stand up, torn between the voyeuristic urge to watch the disaster and the instinctive need to flee the toxicity. The cameras, indifferent to the emotional carnage, continued to capture every flush of Julia's face and every crack in Kelly's voice. Julia's defense was a frantic list of grievances. The way women are forced to smile through their pain, the way they are dissected for entertainment, and the way the industry discards people once they are no longer profitable. But Kelly's rebuttal was like steel. No one had forced her choice. Julia had walked into that room of her own volition, and now she was trying to burn it down because she couldn't handle the consequences of being there. The chaos reached its zenith as the physical environment of the studio began to reflect the internal collapse of the interview. Kelly's producer hovered at the edge of the frame, his urgent whispers into his headset, a precursor to the intervention everyone knew was coming. Security personnel, sensing the volatility of Julia's movements, edged closer to the desk. Kelly, now operating with a devastating, cold calm, made the final executive decision to protect the integrity of her space. She formally ended the interview, asking Julia to leave the stage. The request was a monumental blow to Julia's ego. The idea that she could be dismissed like a common trespasser sent her into a tailspin. She invoked her fame as a shield, demanding if Kelly knew who she was, only to be met with a response that stripped away all celebrity status. She was simply someone who had forgotten that fame is not a license for cruelty. The tension finally snapped when Julia reached for a glass of water. For a heartbeat, the room held its breath, fearing the liquid or the glass itself was intended for Kelly. Instead, Julia hurled it against the floor. The sound of shattering glass acted as a starting pistol for the security team. As the audience screamed, 2 guards moved in, their presence a stark contrast to the bright, cheerful lights of the set. Julia's protests about assault and telling the truth rang hollow against the physical evidence of the broken shards at her feet. She was escorted toward the exit, her struggle against the guards becoming increasingly futile as the adrenaline of her outburst began to fade into a visible, bone-deep exhaustion. As she reached the doors, Julia threw one last parting shot, claiming Kelly couldn't handle the truth. Kelly's final response was a quiet, sorrowful reflection on how Julia's truth had turned her into a person who hurts others. When the heavy studio doors finally clicked shut, the silence that followed was heavier than the shouting. Kelly stood alone, the polished floor reflecting her weary silhouette. She turned to her audience and the millions watching at home, offering a sincere apology for the breakdown. She reaffirmed the core values of her show, kindness, and respect, reminding everyone that no level of accomplishment excuses the mistreatment of others. The audience's standing ovation wasn't just for a host, but for the defense of human dignity in an industry that often forgets it. As the credits prepared to roll on this historic television disaster, the question remained for the world to debate. Was this a justified removal of a hostile guest, or the tragic public unraveling of a legend who had simply reached her breaking point?